Good evening. My name is Christina Jia, and welcome to our Gold Street Financial Center today.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm House. So thank you so much for showing up in this rainy night. I know that I've heard that California people does not know how to drive when in the rain. And thank you so much for taking all this trouble and kept asking yourself, oh, what am I doing to myself in the rain, in the traffic jam? Thank you very much for showing up.
Yes, thank you. We got great number of registrations, and then I guess some people still not show up. For those of you be on time, you definitely get your time worth. And then even though it's raining cats and dogs outside, we're serious here, right? Talking about the kids, right? And then that's why I want to introduce the topics. As you may already know, we have two seminars today. So this, the first one basically helps the kids, helps the children get ready to the top university. And the second one, as a parents, as a family, when the kids ready, are you ready to fund them? Wow, yes, that's a big, big question. If we can answer both, we all happily, right? And then I will introduce a little bit for House, if you already see. Don't you wonder why we have so many cameras here? You want to explain a little bit for our audience?
So I just want to apologize to our audiences. The cute guy over there, I'm sorry that you're sitting there, like perhaps the camera is kind of blocking your view, because we Harmony Plus have this kind of event every single Friday, and we have holding on this event for almost 150 sessions or in weeks already. Yes, and each time we have live streams on 4 different digital platforms. So in total, we are covering around 5,000 audiences all over America, North America, and including a few of them in China. So that's why we currently have different cameras there. If it's kind of blocking your view, you might want to adjust your seat a little bit to ensure this enjoyable experiences with Martin Walsh, one of our Harmony Plus coach, our super honorable guest speaker, keynote speaker of tonight, the college counselor at Harker School, and the former assistant dean at Stanford. So,
yeah. I have to say, picture doesn't do the adjustment. You know how handsome he is, right? Later on, right? And
I was way more rested than I was before.
I know, yeah. That's why picture him, not this picture. And then also, we will very happy to introduce our co-sponsor who invited Martin as one of the coaches here. You also get an introduction from them. I will let House maybe give you a little bit handout what they offer, and then we will get Martin ready.
Thank you, Christina. So we Harmony Plus is an international learning ecosystem located in Mountain View, the heart of Silicon Valley. So as an official partner with UC Berkeley, our mission is to upgrade education and empower students with all kinds of resources they might need. So our major service is that we have this future planning long-term development package, which covers around 1 to 10 years, where our students got the expertise from our super experienced education consultants, which are usually like former admission officers or like scientists, researchers, PhDs. So really wanted to share with you that what we have and help with the improvement and growth of your children. So that's our mission. Also, we wanted to, sorry about that, we really want to say that Happy New Year to everyone, because Chinese New Year is just around the corner, and we have issued this Chinese New Year wrapped envelope to every children in this seminar as a symbol in Chinese tradition, as a symbol for luck, fortune, and our best wishes.
Sure. A quick question for all the audience. I know everybody's very smart. Who knows the next Chinese New Year? What's the animal symbol? Pig, right? Everybody knows, right? How to say it in Chinese? Megan? Pig, Chinese? You want to try, Monica?
Chinese,
Wow, you got it, Megan. Wow, great.
I know Korean.
Korean, yeah. We get audience from all over the world. As we see, the audience all over the world is, see the through our broadcasting as well. So please respect everybody, each other. I know it's a big room, but we filled each room with all the people here, right? We get exciting for the keynote speaker, and then we get exciting for our next seminar. Please respect each other. We have, people help the seminar goes on very well. So without further ado, and then remember, the picture doesn't do any justice. Let's welcome this handsome speaker, Martin Walsh.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, got it. Hi. All right, that was pretty funny. My name is Martin Walsh. I work at Harker, so any Harker kids or parents here, one's here, a couple are here. And so really the talk's not really about that particular, my work as a counselor at Harker, but really sometimes I'm invited to give talks on what it was like to evaluate applications and read applications. And I did that at two universities, Stanford and Santa Clara University, where I served as director of admissions as well. My path into college admissions it really started because I was a teacher, and I would teach really smart kids like Apple, and then Apple would apply to this really great school and she would get denied. Sorry, Apple. And I would always wonder, well, why? Who gets picked and why do they get picked? And eventually my curiosity got the best of me, and I just took a job, an entry-level job at Santa Clara. At the time, I'd been working at the international school in Caracas, Venezuela. I do bring bad luck to countries, if you've been reading the news. I just came home and I was like, I'm going to take a year off and I'm going to just learn a little bit about college admissions. Well, what started as a one-year thing became now kind of a whole different career. I kind of rose up at Santa Clara up to director. Then Stanford called up and Stanford was like, do you want to be assistant dean? And I thought it was a fluke phone call. I thought it was my brother making fun of me, and I hung up on him. But it was Dean Rick Shaw at Stanford University, and so he asked me to be the assistant dean. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I took the job at Stanford and worked admissions there, and stayed there until, quite frankly, I got married. And you might wonder, what does marriage have to do with working at Stanford? But Stanford had me traveling so much that I thought, gosh, if I want to stay married, maybe I should not travel quite so much. So I was approached by Harker, and I took the position there. But what's been really fun is taking those experiences, and my goal in the next 45 minutes is for Apple and Misha and some of the other students and parents here have a little better feel of what it's like for the people that are making those decisions. Who gets in, a thumbs up, why, a thumbs up, a thumbs down, why, and maybe you'll walk away with a little better insight on the whole thing. And the first thing I would say to the students that are here is, please, as you go through this process, as you apply to college, and I know this is going to sound hard, but don't take it too personal if the answer is no. It's just guys like me, and I make mistakes. In fact, when I worked at Stanford, I always told students, gosh, if I admit you, I give you 5 minutes to pat yourself on the back and feel special, and then get to work. And if I deny you, then I told the student, and remember, I make mistakes, And if I deny you, I give you 5 minutes to be upset, sit down, and then get to work because I make mistakes. And it's a very imperfect process, selecting students in this, and it'll kind of drive you crazy. So, I was talking to Apple a little bit earlier, and Apple's my test case student, and I was like, Apple, why are you here? And she's like, well, I want to get into a good college. And I was like, okay, Apple. And then she was like, well, how do I get into college? And my first answer is always, well, what school are you applying to? So, how do I get admitted is the most common question that I'm faced with. How do I get into some of these special schools? And my response is always to someone like Alice. I'm like, Alice, tell me where you're applying, and I'll tell you how to get admitted. Most American universities run one of two different admissions models. The first one here, numeric evaluation, is super easy to understand. That means you're kind of almost running an admissions office that's a spreadsheet admissions office. I get your grades, I look at the program of study, I look at your rigor, did you take APs or honors, I create a spreadsheet, I look at the number of seats I have, I rip that spreadsheet and I say admit, deny. Numeric admissions models are run and used oftentimes by very large public universities. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, they just run spreadsheets, run them, numeric models along those lines. The UC system, I think you can predict what's going to happen based on your numbers and program of study. Numeric. The other model is the model that drives a lot of parents and kids crazy, and that's the holistic model of evaluation. And working at Stanford and Santa Clara, that's the model that I was involved in. Now, Alice, you seem super engaged, you haven't fallen asleep yet, and if you get this wrong, I'm going to ask Misha, our Russian exchange student. Alice, how can you tell as a student if you're applying to a school that's holistic evaluation? What's your best clue that it's like, wow, they're not just looking at my numbers? I don't know. Apple?
Well, they look at your extracurricular activities.
So they're going to ask about your extracurricular activities. Misha?
They look at your character and personality.
They ask about your personality. Yeah, they make you write stuff, which is the bane of every student's existence, writing those application essays. It's like, ugh. But if you have to write those essays, the first clue is you maybe should breathe and feel happy because it's not purely numeric. Because if it's purely numeric, you look at your numbers and you're like, oh, I'm in trouble. You know, but if it's holistic, you're like, maybe I can write this amazing essay that'll get their attention. Got it? So numeric versus and holistic are our two models. I'm going to start with holistic a little bit. It is used by some public universities, like UC Berkeley, UCLA. If you're applying to those UCs out of your particular school right now, they're going to make you write a few essays, 4 essays as a matter of fact. But I'll be honest with you. The essays are pretty short. I'll be honest with you. I'm not super convinced they read them. I just don't know how much time they have, you know? I still think it's pretty numeric. The University of Michigan, and I apologize if there's any Michigan grads in here, you know, they're very much like, oh, we're a public university, but we incorporate or we embrace holistic evaluation, and they make you write a ton of essays. There's no way they read them. There's no way. So one of my students one time at Harker did a little test, and the middle of the essay was pretty much like, if you are still reading this essay, I give you permission to deny me, because I don't think you're reading these. And the kid got admitted with the scholarship. So, you know, I think that if it's a large public university on your application list, you can bet that you can look at your numbers and program of study, and you have a pretty good idea where you sit in the applicant pool. But Alice, when you sit down to write that Stanford application, you're like, oh my God, another essay. And Misha, you're like, oh my gosh, Princeton's asking me all these crazy things. It's going to be like, that means they're evaluating you holistically. Now, the best thing to understand about holistic evaluation, so I would get my team at Stanford and I would train my team. I'd be like, okay team, you know, what are we looking for? And now this is going to sound crazy, but here's the truth. Holistic evaluation means you're looking at numbers and other factors. And I always thought it was kind of like, hosting a dinner party. Or at lunch, Alice, you got out lunch, and you've got your tray there with your lunch, like, who do you sit next to? Do you sit next to your brother Kevin? He looks kind of dour, not super exciting. You know, you're looking, like, kind of college admissions is a little bit like, who do you want to kind of sit next to? Who is interesting? And I told my team at Stanford, we're trying to create the most interesting group of undergraduates in the world. And sometimes that's illustrated by numbers, but gosh, there were some very interesting football players at Stanford that we needed on our team. There were some very interesting conversations from different parts of the world. You're trying to create this interesting melange of people. And that's the best way to describe holistic evaluation. Defined, it's basically evaluation of the overall quality of the applicant by considering various aspects. And that whole various aspects things can drive you crazy. And here's the other thing, Apple. Every private university could value different various aspects. So what would you value? Let's say you are now Dean of Admissions at Princeton, $250,000, house on campus, not a bad gig. What is the one thing you'd say, I want really smart kids, but what's that other thing that you look for? Give me just one, I'll give you one thing.
Open-minded.
And how would you figure out if a kid's open-minded?
I would look at their essays.
Oh, you're making them write essays? That means you have to hire people to read essays.
Well, I have a team.
Okay, you hope. All right. So you want them to write essays that have questions that show open-mindedness. Okay, Misha, what would you value?
Cultures, like all sorts of different people.
Okay, so your question would be, write an essay about being a different person? That's a weird one.
Being like involved in multiple
Okay. Want them involved in multiple things or one thing?
Either they're very good at one thing, well,
You're like, sabbatical. Yes, sir, you have your hand up?
Leadership.
All right, leadership, maybe you're valuing that. The fact of the matter is that every dean of admission and every admissions team gets to kind of pick those things they're going to value. It's truly, I always felt like the admissions office of a university was like being in the cockpit of the plane. You know, there's other people doing other things, but you're kind of figuring out who the passengers are going to be. You're trying to land this plane. You're trying to kind of really kind of do a lot of social engineering. So some years when I was at Santa Clara, we had this meeting and it was like, gosh, we've got this great university at Santa Clara, but once you go east of Chicago, nobody's heard of Santa Clara. You know, so it's like, so you all of a sudden, I'm at Santa Clara too. So it'd be like, okay, all of a sudden you started to run an admissions model that benefited addresses. If you applied from Connecticut, if you went to Phillips Andover or Phillips Exeter, I don't care how many bad grades you had, we want you. We're trying to get our name out there. So there's all sorts of factors that could be at play as you're trying to kind of create things and you get those marching orders. So various aspects and elements. Of course, everything always begins with numbers. So I have to be honest, as I'm starting to meet with Harker students now, I'm meeting with the juniors, you know, I'm kind of saying, you know, at the end of the day, I don't care how great your essays are, and Alice, I'm sure you're going to write great essays, but if I glance down and I see numbers that don't match up with the numeric expectations of my university, you're kind of in trouble. So even if it's a holistic evaluation thing, you still got to have those numbers that mean, okay, you fit in with kind of my dinner party. Or the other analogy I have, and we had this at Stanford, is, quite frankly, the roller coaster analogy, which is some universities, those rides go fast. And, you know, the rides at Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, that's a fast-moving ride. And it does nobody any good, not the student or the university, to put someone on a ride where the whole time they're scared to death and they don't know what they're doing there, and they're like, oh my God, I'm going to fall, I'm going to die. You have to keep that in mind. And sometimes as students, if a university says no, they're not saying, gosh, you're not smart. It's more like, our rides are doing this, and we think you're more ready for rides that go like that. It's the zigzag type thing. But some of these universities, the rides are moving really, really quickly. So I can remember sitting in at Stanford committee, and we ended up denying a kid that I thought was pretty strong, and the dean was like, I just look at the curriculum, I look at what the student wrote, and it doesn't seem like a good match of what we're about, what our rides are doing, and what we want our students to do. And I remember that quite a bit. So, you know, you start with numbers, and you've got to have those numbers. Next, though, you go into your personal qualities. And it could be a lot of things. Leadership definitely was something that some colleges valued. Character. Challenges met and overcome. And here's the big thing. Never, students out there, write about a challenge that's not really a challenge. So when I give this workshop in Southern California, some of the students down there, their challenge is the fact that they wanted to get a new Lexus for their birthday, and they got a used Lexus, and you read that essay, or the disappointment of not being homecoming queen. These were not real challenges. So challenges met and overcome. Finding purpose, passion, and meaning. That was very much a Santa Clara thing, because it's a Catholic school. We were looking for those kids that had really strong ethical values. Intellectual vitality is a huge term. So what you've got to understand with holistic evaluation is it's a two-prong assessment, or there's two doors to get through. So if it's numeric assessment, it's one door. My numbers match, I'm applying to a program, it all matches. The read process is pretty quick. Once you get into holistic evaluation, you're going to get a lot of essays, and there's going to be two doors to get through. First, I have to read and say, the numbers are okay. To give it a real estate analogy, this person has the down payment for the neighborhood. Doesn't mean, though, they get to buy the house. It just means now I have to read the rest of the application. And Alice, I'm going to be honest with you. At Stanford, sometimes my favorite students applied with such bad grades that I didn't have to read their essays. And I felt like writing them a thank you email because I was so tired. I was like, thank you for being a horrible student, Alice. Those 5 Ds meant I could go to bed before midnight. I appreciate that. You're denied, but thanks, that second prong. So there's the academic or numeric and then the personal. And we want to keep that in mind. And the deans are going to come up with their own personal things. So this is actually a screenshot that I think is illegal for me to have. But I've been using it for a while. This is the screenshot from Stanford. So this is the Stanford Guidebook for Admissions Officers. And And Stanford might be an amazing university, but when I left the admissions office, they forgot to take the guidebook from me. And I kind of forgot I had it until I was going through some stuff, and I'm like, wait, here's the Stanford binder. And they do a great job here of defining intellectual vitality. So again, this is that second prong, and people are always like, so what does it take to get into Stanford? They're very big on intellectual vitality, so let's go through this bit by bit. Intellectual vitality is easy to identify, then define. So right off the bat, it's fuzzy. It's not engineering terms. It's like, you kind of know it when you see it, but I can't actually define it. And it can take lots of forms. And here's a scary one, Apple. Look at this second line. Lots of AP and college courses, long-term papers, and academic summer research projects do not guarantee intellectual vitality. This is where a Berkeley admit is different than a Stanford admit. A Berkeley admit is like, no, that guarantees admission to Berkeley. A Stanford admit's like, you got the money to live in my neighborhood, doesn't mean I want to have you over to the house. You know, maybe you have neighbors you don't really want to hang out with. So you've got the numbers, but not going to have you over to the house. Such accomplishments are not distinctive, Apple, nor do they demonstrate a student's active enjoyment. And here's the big thing, active enjoyment of and engagement in the learning process. Alice, do you actively enjoy the learning process? Kind of. So, I don't know. I don't know if that essay will fly. Kevin, do you actively enjoy the learning process?
Yeah.
I like that. All right, I've just waitlisted your sister. You've got my attention. Give me one example of you actively enjoying the learning process.
I focus on learning.
But examples, please. My dean here wants hardcore examples. For example, in history class, we were studying the Revolutionary War, and on a lark, I dressed up as George Washington to inspire the class. You're like, that's just weird. I don't know, it's tough. Don't confuse academic-based extracurricular activities with intellectual vitality, math Olympiads or things like that. These are all great. These are all things that are going to get you into that numeric school. But I don't know. Here's the thing. Strong IB, strong intellectual vitality, students that have assumed responsibility for the learning process, show maturity and self-discipline in fulfillment of projects, often well beyond the limitations of a school assignment. They read deeply on their own. They don't wait for homework assignment, Kevin. They're reading on their own. They create energetically or experiment creatively in response to a profound intellectual curiosity. In short, take your first or second grade personality and revert back to that. When you're a curious kid, not worried about homework assignments, not worried about doing what the teacher tells you, and just literally, you're embracing learning for the sake of learning. So that's the curveball. In high school, they're going to load you down with APs, they're going to load you down with this or that. When I'm telling you the key to getting into a school like Stanford is actually taking some of those, but don't get too caught up in it. Do some other stuff. One time I was working at Stanford, and a kid wrote this amazing essay. And he was like, he applied to want to be an engineer, and he talks about in the essay, he talked about working at a gas station. He's like, so I got this job at a gas station, saved my money, and I bought an old Jeep. And I'm like, okay, and the dad was out of the picture. He came from kind of a rugged background down in San Diego. And he described driving the Jeep home, letting out noises. The mom's there, and the mom's like, what are you doing with that piece of crap? You're not parking it here. And the kid's like, don't worry, Mom, I'm gonna fix up the Jeep. So he takes apart the engine, reads up, puts the engine back together, goes to start the Jeep, and it doesn't start. So he's like, so, I got another book. I read up, I figured out what I was doing wrong. Took apart the Jeep, put the engine back together, it still didn't start. And I'm reading this essay and I'm thinking, at the time, Stanford's football team was horrible, and I'm like, we don't need this. We're losing football games, this Jeep doesn't start. The last line of the essay said, please let me come and study engineering at Stanford so I can get my damn Jeep to start. So that's vitality. Like, he was hyped. Is he showing maturity, self-discipline? He's got a job, he's trying to get his Jeep to work. He was funny. He's still, he's got like that personality. Like, when you read the essay, you're like, you literally, the best, I want to be around that person. When that person comes onto my campus, they're going to do stuff. They're not going to wait for the teacher to tell them what to do, but they're going to do stuff. And that's the personality, because a school like Stanford, or a highly selective school, the ride's moving fast. And if you're waiting for someone to give you instructions, you're in trouble already. And if the school sets aside, $8 million for freshman research alone, which Stanford does, this is not a place to go and say, so what's research? No. They're looking for kids like, I've got a question, here's what I want to explore, let me add it. Another analogy I have is my sister, later in life, had a surprise pregnancy, and as sometimes happens, the surprise pregnancy was twins, Sarah and Dan. And sometimes, when my sister would just be over the whole thing, she had a bunch of other kids, she'd be like, take Sarah and Dan. So I'd take Sarah and Dan, and I'd take them to Marriott, the Great American, right? Take them to the amusement park, and I'd have their hands. And then I'd let go of their hands, because I'm a horrible babysitter. And Dan always stood there, and he was like a little bit afraid, like, what am I doing, where should I go? And Sarah sprinted. And I always say this, in college admissions, admit the sprinter. Admit the kid that's sprinting towards something. And actually, a lot of kids get very caught up in the numeric piece. But you can get so caught up in the numeric piece that congratulations, you're going to get into Berkeley, San Diego, Davis. These are amazing schools. But you're so caught up in the numeric piece that quite frankly, you've lost the vitality. You're not an interesting dinner party companion. And that's the thing. That's the thing where my advice to the younger students here is like, yeah, you have to play the game a little bit. You have to take some APs, you have to get some good grades. But don't lose the part of you that school will kill, which is homework, test, homework, test, homework, test, as opposed to just being excited about something. Remember always the kid that got into Stanford because his Jeep didn't work. That's who you admit because he's trying to get it to work. Intellectual vitality is not always academic. I mean, I had kids that were writers. I had kids that did all sorts of things. I had a student that started an online business, and I talk about this sometimes as a Harker student. The opening line of her essay was beautiful. The opening line of her college essay was this: I first declared bankruptcy at the age of 16. You gotta admit that kid. Like, that's just a great line. The essay also went on to explain that that's a great time to declare bankruptcy because all your debt goes over to your parents. So I was like, this kid's brilliant, you know? Like, so she started an online business, learning languages, training for marathons, triathlons, anything that you think is like, no, this is something that I'm truly interested in, and I'm going to go for it. I'm sprinting towards it. I'm not doing it to get into a school. I'm doing it because I'm actually truly interested in it. Holistic evaluation and the application essays. So we're getting a feel for that, and that's why these schools have a lot of things to write. You know, Stanford will ask you, Alice, write a note to your future roommate. What is an idea that you ponder? You know, not something that you've solved, but that you ponder. And the most common mistake kids make in that essay when I read it at Stanford was, they said, here's how smart I am. Look, I figured this out. And I'm like, that wasn't what I was asking. I was asking, like, give me a problem where you're like, I'm pondering this, like a dog gnaws on a bone. I'm trying to figure this one out. You've got these questions, and they're all designed to try and get a feel for what the student's thinking, how they are they ready to get on our rides? That's where the writing piece comes in. Now, you've got definitely that kind of long personal statement essay that's there, that's like, here's what I'm about, and like the Jeep one I just told you. And then you've also got some shorter questions, and they kind of, that's your chance to kind of do that. Now, here's my caution. When you work with counselors, when you work on these writing symbols with your teachers or counselors, whatever, it's great to get ideas. It's great to read it's great to hear from somebody so you can get what you can do. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe that the best essays are not over-edited by an adult. They're guided by an adult, and I always say that my work at Harker is way more like on the guardrails on the highway. I'm going to make sure you don't veer all over the place with your essay. I'll give it structure. But the idea, it's always best when it comes from that 17-year-old voice. Here's what I want to write about. Here's the story I want to tell. So be careful about over-editing or over-coaching on these things, because that's what the reader really, really wants. I am positive that some professional reader would have gotten that Jeep essay and said, you can't write about a failure. You can't swear in your essay. You can't say all of these things. I'm like, all the things he was probably not supposed to do are what made that essay memorable 15 years later. So that's where the essay piece comes into play. And I think that someone kind of sent an online question that was sort of like, when should students start on their essays? Well, if you know anything about the American admissions model and the cycle, most of your applications are going out before Christmas, some in October, some in December. You kind of want to hold off on those essays, because sometimes you're having those really formative experiences that summer before senior year. So I always think like August, right before you start senior year, is a good time to sit down and say, okay, I'm pretty mature now. I think I have some ideas of what I want to write about, and I'm going to start writing. I'd say that's about the timeline to think about those essays. I want to bring this up also when you're talking about a private university, and this was the coolest thing ever at Stanford, and I think it should be a television show, and it was the committee system. So an admissions office at a university is designed or structured like a sales office. You are given a territory. So Apple here's the dean, and Apple turns to Misha and says, Misha, you have New England and all those boarding schools. You're going to go and visit there, and you're going to recruit at those schools, and then you're going to come back, and when they apply, you're going to read those applications. Now, for some schools, like Santa Clara, a small admissions office, I could read my territory and I would make the decision on my own, admitted, denied, waitlisted. But for your more selective universities, Stanford, USC, Pomona, Harvey Mudd, they've got the committee system. So all that Misha could really do with her territory is take those applications back, stand up in front of the committee and say, here is why I would like to admit Alice. Let me read out the essay. Let me read out the letters of recommendation. And it was a fascinating thing to watch because I'd be there and I'd be talking, and then all of a sudden, the head of the committee, I'm not the head of the committee, I'm the presenter, the head of the committee would put up their hand, which just meant stop talking. And you literally stop talking. I had no vote. I could only decide who I brought to committee. I didn't have a vote. And then it was very Roman Colosseum stuff. It was just like this, boom, admit, waitlist, deny. Sometimes there'd be some back and forth questioning, and then that was it. Then the committee was ready to vote. There are some universities, I believe Cornell has professors in on committee. You're always trying to kind of include the community, and you're there kind of advocating of who you want to bring in. So there's nothing sadder than like applying to a great school. You're applying to Dartmouth, you're there and you get the letter, and it's like, oh, I've been waitlisted. Because what that really means is you made it to committee. You made it over a ton of hurdles, and you were discussed. And who knows, and you'll never know what that vote was. Was it 5-4? Was it 7-3? Something you'll never know what the vote was. All you know is you made it to committee. And that's like, so close. But the committee piece was always kind of a fascinating piece of the process. The pull relevant information from the application, the pull quotes from the essays, from the letters of recommendation from the teachers, etc. So that's kind of how things worked. Numeric evaluation, I think we won't spend too much time on it because it's so obvious. It's like just what's the spreadsheet, what's my numbers, and kind of go from there. I do want to share with you some highlights of what happened in the last cycle or two. Because quite frankly, applying to college, think of your application as being like what happens to your t-shirts when you put them in the dryer and they get blown all over the place. There's a lot of external factors that go well beyond your essays and well beyond your grades that are going to dictate whether I admit you or don't admit you. There's a lot of external factors. Most of them you have zero control over. It's super competitive. Well, first of all, more apps per student. When I went through this process, 30, 40 years ago, you know what? You applied to, wow, I didn't know I should Mr. Train. You applied to probably 5 or 4 schools. That was it. The average student now, the average female now applies to 15 universities, and the average male runs out of gas and applies to about 12, and then they say, it's stupid, if not, I'll join the army. They're kind of like, I'm over it, here's the number. So there's more apps per student. The other thing is this, you're gonna hear in the news about all these schools getting record number of applications. And yes, there is a number of universities that have record numbers, but it's not spread out evenly. Just like there are certain parts of the United States that have a ton of money and other parts that are struggling. There are certain universities that get a ton of applications, others have not so much. And then finally, the explosion of international applications from India, South Korea, China, some from the UK. We're starting to see a little bit from the UK as far as that goes. You're starting to get so if you are applying to some of these brand universities in the United States, don't kid yourself. You are competing against an international pool. I almost guarantee it. That's very different from when when I went through this process back in the old time days when Stanford's admin rate was a stunning 38%. So if you meet an old time Stanford grad and they act like they're super, super cool, be like, come on, 38%? That's junior college now. Back off. And I apologize if there's any Stanford people out there. Let me illustrate. Here's some UC explosions that we saw, 2012 to 2018. UCLA, 113,500 applications roughly. They got more applications than any university in the United States. Irvine really jumped, 94,000, almost 95,000. That surprised a lot of people. I actually think the theory there is a fairly young population growing up near UC Irvine, and it's a population that traditionally doesn't send their kids off far distances. So it's a lot of kind of more stay-at-home kids. They exploded. UC San Diego, 60 to 97. Santa Barbara, UC Santa Cruz. I mean, these are stunning numbers. So you're definitely seeing that explosion of applications.
What's the percentage they say?
It can, well, hold on for a second here. Sorry. It can really vary by the university, but I think that Berkeley and UCLA's admit rate was 8% this year, 8 to 9%.
Let's go down the bigger numbers.
Yeah, the bigger numbers down here, I'm sorry, let me go back here. The easiest UC to get into would be Santa Cruz or Riverside, and their admit rates are closer to 40 some odd percent. Those are your quote unquote easy, and that's still below 50%. So the UC brand, I mean, congratulations to the California taxpayers. We've built up this amazing UC system that's now in many ways, you know, the world looks to it for their research facilities, for their engineering programs. You know, the world looks to this stuff and they're getting tons of applications. The issue is, how many seats does the state fund? And that could really impact how many kids are admitted. Other universities that we saw, you know, to give you some context. So kids out there, you know, Alice, if your mom is ever like, what do you mean you didn't get into an Ivy League school? Just say, Mom, you know, 40,000 applications to Columbia to admit to get a class at 2,000? Like, that's absurd. That's ridiculous. UPenn, 35,788 applications. I mean, these are the number of people they accept because they're expecting a yield of somewhere in that 70 to 80% to create their class. Yes, sir?
What about doing your application in-state versus out-of-state, since it's much preferred for out-of-state for them to collect?
Well, it depends, are we public or private?
Okay.
So if it's a public university, the UC system, the state will fund X number of seats. And those seats are for the in-state kids. But here's what's been going on some years with the legislature is they don't fund very many seats. So actually, there was a point a couple years back where if you wanted to get into UCLA, I recommended living in Louisiana or Indiana or anywhere but California, because UCLA was 40% out of state or international. Because the state had only funded X number of seats. Now, you might say, okay, so what are those kids doing there? Well, if you're dean or president of UCLA, you're like, do I leave the seats empty and then we're really bleeding money, or do I just fill them with kids that are out of state and charge them more? And then what happened is the states have become addicted to out-of-state money. So right now, quite frankly, Alice, I'll be honest with you, you have a great chance of getting into UW Seattle. And the kid in Seattle has a great chance of getting into UC San Diego. And, you know, if you ever want to see people angry, you know, walk around Austin, Texas with a California t-shirt, because Austin's filled with California kids. And then, you know, eventually this is going to be a very cool social experiment as we get this sort of mixing of like the kid that grew up in Cupertino that's going to University of North Carolina. And it's like, and it could be a really good thing. But the fact of the matter is state legislatures have become addicted to the profit that they can make off of out-of-state kids. And I would actually say this, California kids, don't kid yourself. These are your bargains. Don't, if you have great grades and UCLA still says no, but like a school like UT Austin or a school like UW Seattle comes through, take it. They're great schools. But you can't get caught up in some of that stuff. Here's some of the Ivy League numbers to show you how competitive they've gotten. Here's my favorite example. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to Burlingame High School back in the day. Go Panthers. To the international group. USC used to be kind of, and I apologize if there's any USC grads in here, but it was kind of a party school. It was kind of a place where you went if you were kind of like athletic or fun or whatever, and they were very famous for just admitting the legacy of USC parents. So you almost had this sort of USC inbreed thing, which like, you know, you go to USC, you meet your wife, you have kids, and you get into that third or fourth generation, and these are not the brightest bulbs. So anyway, long story short, USC kind of moved away from that model. They decided to take their tremendous wealth and to start to really scholarship and try to attract top kids. Well, what you've got now with like Iovine Young, engineering, their pre-med programs, their accelerated med programs, that pre-professional track, they've exploded, and USC's become incredibly popular, particularly with immigrant communities, and you're seeing 2011, 37,000 applications. So I started off working at Harker, you know, around that time, and it was like, USC, to be honest with you, for kids that had really good grades, I'm like, this is a safety. Well, their projection for 2018, what they got was 64,000 applications. Their admit rate dropped to 13%. The nightmare gets worse. Then, you know what happened? Too many people said yes to their offer. So I know, Alice, sometimes your parents are away and you throw big parties, and you invite 5 or 6 kids, but all of a sudden 12 show up. You're like, what the heck, I'm in big trouble. Stuff gets broken. For USC, they are this year officially over-enrolled. And when I talked to the dean at USC, a good friend of mine, he said, yeah, we're probably dropping down to a 9% admit rate for 2019. 9%. 9% is more competitive than most of your Ivies. So you've got, like, that's my example of like, talk about a school that's become a global brand. And they really exploded, and it's a tough one. Trends, hooks, and hidden agendas. And I've got a few minutes here. First of all, major matters. The male poetry major. You don't see many of those. The program at the university that's maybe not super popular. I mean, you want to be assured of a deny offer, apply to Penn in the school, in Wharton School. You want to definitely feel what it's like to get denied by Penn. I don't care how many lives you saved, how many businesses you've started. I mean, they would deny, they would deny anybody, like the Apple co-founder. Like, that is impossible. I'm very good friends with the people at Penn. They're like, it's the most uneven applicant pool ever. We get all these kids that are applying to Wharton. So sometimes the major matters, or what I tell the kids sometimes is, most universities are not single door admissions. Meaning, oh, I'm applying to Boston University, it's one door and I'm admitted. No, it's Boston University, and then you're trying to get into like, which school? Communications, engineering, this or that. And the school you're trying to get into, some doors are easy to open, other doors are really difficult. Carnegie Mellon's a great example. I say Carnegie Mellon, what programs do you think of? Computer science, exactly. Admit rate at Carnegie Mellon computer science, 8%, 7%. Overall admit rate for Carnegie Mellon, 30%. What does that tell you about their other programs? So certain doors are really hard to open. So keep in mind major matters. This is an up-here trend. Here you're seeing stuff with STEM graduates. Computer science kind of exploding, most definitely there. Engineering exploding. Other programs starting to level off. Mathematics a bit less popular, but there's some STEM breakdowns. Yes, question?
So you said the major matters, right? I know Stanford, you don't apply to a major.
Yes, but they ask you for, what are you thinking? So I always work with these kids that are like, I've got this plan, Mr. Walsh. I'm thinking about being a Latin major, and I'm looking at their transcript, I'm like, you've never even taken Latin. Like, what are you trying, like, they're trying to use these little fake things. You look at the transcripts and you can tell where someone's going. So Stanford is like kind of that mid-range sort of open curriculum. They take into account what you're putting down, and they look at that transcript, and it's pretty obvious where's a kid going. If you're doing post-AP computer science, and you're trying to tell me that you're there to study Latin, I don't buy it. So they'll look at that and they'll take that account as they evaluate. Yes?
In terms of major, for a lot of kids, they don't really know what they really like. So for those kids, if they apply for, non-major,
right.
is it they are in the disadvantage?
Well, you're still probably putting down a school like I'm arts and sciences undeclared. And which is a path some kids do, and that's fine if they're legitimately exploring. The problem is the kid that uses the arts and sciences undeclared to get in, then they want to get over to engineering. And the university will be like, wait a minute, in order to make that shift from one school to the next, we want you to take these courses and get these grades, and you're probably adding a year onto your college experience, which is a very expensive proposition. Most undeclared kids are just arts and sciences, and they're exploring whether they want to be, kind of pre-law, econ, biology, chemistry, etc. A lot of the kids that are what are called pre-professional, which is they're just saying, I know exactly what I want to do. And you definitely see those as well.
In terms of application, is it
Excuse me, we have a question time right after.
Oh, sorry, we do. I forgot.
So we will save it for later. Thank you.
Case study of UW Seattle right here, and you can definitely see computer science application counts exploding, others leveling off. And that's, again, an example of uneven applicant pools to different universities. Engineering count application explosion. USC went up 20% 1 year. Carnegie Mellon 33% over 5 years. University of Illinois 21% in 2 years. Santa Clara 12% in 1 year. I mean, you're just seeing that when these schools get these application explosions, it's also very major specific. Engineering admit rates. Santa Clara University dropped from 51 to 35% in 1 year. Carnegie 5% computer science. They waitlisted 21 kids that had perfect SATs. That's just how crowded things got. USC is at 8% computer science. I have some friends at USC in engineering, they're like, we're a good program, but they're like, we're not 8% good. They're kind of like, they're even a little bit shocked by the numbers that they've got. Another big trend is going to be, when am I reading your application, Alice? Are you applying in my early pool or my regular pool? The American model, a lot of these universities break down their application cycle into early or regular. And the terms there would be early decision. And for those of you that are married, you hold up the ring. Early decision means done. If I admit you, we are married. I always have a student that comes to me at Harker and says, I'm applying to 5 early decision schools. And then I'm like, how many women are going to be waiting for you as you walk down the aisle to get married? It's like, hopefully just one. Early decision means done. You are telling the university, I commit to you if you commit to me. Early action just means you're getting the application in an early fashion. And then there's restrictive early action, which is Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford, your HIPS, which means you can only apply to us, but if we admit you, you don't have to go. Apple, you're admitted to Yale. Are you going to go? Probably. Yeah. So they know what they're doing. Applying early decision. Johns Hopkins, you get a great bump. 2,037 applications in the early pool. They admitted 610. Their overall class is 1,400 or so they filled up 30% of their class in the early pool. Northwestern, 2,500 class, they admitted 1,073. You can look at the numbers there, the admit rates, and then the percentage of the class that's filled up. George Washington, 61% admit rate. Williams, 246 admits out of 585, that's a 46% admit rate. Then you can start to figure it out, like, wait a minute, 610 kids represents a big chunk of that overall class. You're starting to see some schools that are like, they're filling up in their early decision pool. It's a bit like a restaurant. I've reserved, you either have a reservation or you don't. And sometimes the seats are filled up, and if you're not in that early pool, you're in big trouble. I think I'm down to my last couple minutes here. That's my big point here, which is, as you get ready to go through this process, students, Misha back there, it's like, don't look at your college list like a Christmas list. You know, Santa will bring me a gift. Actually, be more logical. Here are my numbers. With these numbers, I know that these numeric schools are going to admit me. Here are my life experiences. Here's my programs of studies. Here are things that are going to help or hook me or bring me in. I've got some questions about extracurriculars. All right, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. They're not as big a deal as you think. It's not like you have to have X number of community service hours. It's not like you have to be captain of this or that. What I looked for more with my extracurriculars was basically, you know, just did you dedicate yourself to something? Did you start to wade in the deep end, you know? I've got kids that debate. They love debate. My son spends so much time playing basketball, but he's not good enough playing college. Should I make him quit? It's like, no. That just is the part that makes him interesting. But you don't have to do a million things. I use the swimming pool analogy. When you're a freshman or a sophomore in high school, you're swimming in the shallow end. You're bouncing around a little bit, trying some different things. Junior and senior year when I read, that was when I was looking for students that were going into the deep end a bit. Maybe doing fewer things, but a deeper commitment to something. So we have an athlete here, like there's a point where you're like, hey, I'm gonna play soccer competitively, and I'm also gonna be part of the science club. I'm gonna do the paper. It's like, there's a point where like you don't have time. And actually, in reality, the older you got, I was more interested in what you committed yourself to, not the number of things you did. So you're starting to wade into that deep end. The competitive high school context matters. You're read within the context of your applicant pool. So sometimes parents are like, wow, why am I sending my kid to Harker? It's so competitive. I'm like, well, the reader knows that, and they read within that context. So you're always kind of read within your applicant pool. Certain high schools are very famous. Thomas Jefferson Academy in Virginia, super famous. You know, like you got one of those applications. Even if there were B's on the transcript, you'd go to committee and say, I don't care. I don't care if there's B's. This is TJ. Like, this is a great school. So you're read within the context. I think that if your child is enjoying the difficult high school or the competitive high school, I think it will pay off. They'll be very prepared for college, and it's taken into account when you're making those reads. Holistic evaluation in summer, maybe my last thing here, and then I'll go to questions. Summer is a great time as you get older to start to show that vitality. You know, rebuild that Jeep, start a soccer camp for kids, learn a different language, learn an instrument, travel, do things that show. That's the time to make yourself interesting. Not the best time to spend the whole summer studying for the SAT or the ACT. It's a better time to kind of do stuff where you're like, no, this is something really cool that I'm passionate about. Profound intellectual curiosity, being original and kind of going from there. So I'm going to take some questions. I went through a little bit fast. I'm sweating. It's hot in here. But we'll go from there. And well, you've got the harmony piece now, and I think we go to questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I go to questions.
From whoever.
Welcome from whomever. Oh, we prioritize students first, then parents. Yes, Apple. And stand up so everyone can hear and talk to our international audience.
Okay. Okay. My name is Apple, and I go to San Francisco International High School. So I have a question because my school follows the IB program instead of the AP program. I just want to ask if there's a difference in the process.
Does everybody here know what the IB is, or has they heard of the IB? I taught the IB. That's like the international curriculum in almost all your international schools, embassy schools. It's sort of, there's the IB out of Switzerland or the AP out of the United States. AP is College Board. IB is a little bit different. I would love it. I loved it when students took the IB. If they went full diploma, that was great, but you didn't. You could also do certs. That was fine with me. Again, I'm looking for you challenging yourself any good admissions officer that's been in the industry for more than 5 minutes understands that curriculum, and they'll be able to kind of evaluate your transcript contextually.
Okay. And I just have a follow-up
Follow-up,
question.
yes.
Because in the IB, you taught the IB, so probably know, there's like a bilingual diploma thing. Does the college look at that?
Yes, we look at everything.
Oh, because my school says they might not distinguish.
If it's submitted, I would look at it. By the way, I didn't say this. How long do you think a reader spends on that first read of your application? Yeah, well, I mean, you definitely want to blow through and figure out who you're taking to committee in somewhere between 10 and 12 minutes. Sometimes it can be less if they're doing group reads. So all that work, 4 years of work, Alice, and it's like, whoa, just a few minutes on the spotlight. Other questions?
All right, thanks for mentioning bilingual because we also welcome all kinds of Chinese questions. Our founder of Harmony Plus is here. He is extremely experienced in education, innovation, and transformation. So very welcome for our Chinese parents and Chinese students to ask any Chinese questions to him.
Right here. Your job as a student would be like, well, how are you evaluating it? That's what I would say. But I'm not an expert on Beijing University. You're welcome. Back question. Good, shout out. Yeah.
Follow-up question on his, if you apply for ED and get accepted, and you're also applying for an international college and get accepted.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do that. At the same time, you know, the colleges are not going to sue you or force you. You know, it's like you're not really, the whole idea behind an ED agreement is the parents and the kids are signing something that says this is the only college we're sending out. I've definitely had kids that like, you know, the ED admissions offer came in, they got zero financial aid money, and the parents are like, we're sending you back to whichever country, it's just cheaper and it makes no sense. And you know, the college just, really generally the college will get mad at me, the college counselor, not you, the parent. They'll be like, you're supposed to have vetted these EDs. But that's probably kind of an out on the ED agreement.
Great
Yes,
question.
Yes, please, nice and loud. We'll do this one first, and then we'll do yours. Okay, yes.
Could you maybe speak a little bit about where the sports scholars or the legacy fit into that model?
Yeah, sure. So some universities have a thing called legacy, meaning if your parents went there, you know, you're going to get a little bump. What I saw with legacy is it guarantees that you're probably brought into committee, but it doesn't guarantee an admissions offer. But if it's a legacy that donated a football field, you're going to get in. You know, because you want to reward those successful graduates, not the legacy guy that's like, here's my dad, he's, you know. No, we have no money. And then if you're an athlete, you know, you'll find out if you're being recruited. You register with the clearinghouse with your grades and things like that. And it's really a two-prong assessment. First, there's the coach that puts you on a list and says, gosh, I really want this kid on my soccer team. And he submits that list to the admissions office. The admissions office then goes to the register, pulls up the grades to make sure that there's an academic fit. And then they have meetings, they talk about things, and you kind of, sometimes with athletes, you're even kind of earlier in the process. You get an earlier read.
I was mostly asking, are those numbers part of your ED numbers or are they typical?
No, they usually kind of, and you really try to take those really rich legacy kids and you try and defer them in the early poll so the New York Times doesn't get that information. And then you even are particularly sneaky and you defer them in the early poll, you waitlist them in the regular poll, and then you admit them when nobody's looking. If the kid has really, really bad grades, but the parents donated like 5 buildings, like, you know, your last name is Gore and you're applying to Harvard, you know, they just slide them in kind of like after graduation even. It's like, oh, by the way, you know, here's these 3 kids that nobody needs to know about. So it can get pretty ugly. Yes, sir, nice and loud. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll do that. So yes, sir, over here.
That's the very last question of tonight.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, you, yes? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, last 2 questions.
Last two questions.
You don't ask anything, you show secret, right?
Exactly.
I actually have a really weird question. Can you clarify the question that you were actually saying that a local is actually competing with international students? I really thought that international students were in different buckets, whereas the American citizens and others, you know, wish or...
So is
maybe
this...
I'm wrong.
No, that's okay. So is this a public UC system or is this a private system?
Together.
Wait, let me ask you again. Which model? Holistic or numeric?
Well, I got confused now. Anyway, so, but I wasn't there because you were moving really fast.
I know.
From slide to
It's
slide.
the coffee.
I knew you were retarded, only answered like late.
Right.
But why are you saying that we're competing with international students?
I was saying that the applicant pool, when you're looking at the explosion of applications in the American private university system, it's no longer like, oh, USC is getting 80% of their applications from California. USC, Stanford, these are global brands. So what you've now got are an influx of applications from India, from South Korea, from China, from Europe. So that's where, when you talk about these explosion of numbers like at USC, it's not like they're all coming from California. But I would say that when Alice applies to USC in 5 short years, the applicant pool is going to be international and global. The number of seats aren't changing. And so USC's, so you're going after an applicant pool that's deeper and more international.
But wouldn't you classify, let's say 100 applicants for...
Sorry about that. Sorry for interruption, but
All right.
each of us could only ask one question.
Would you keep...
Sorry, Martin.
It wasn't 5 years.
All right.
Would you keep certain amount for us?
No.
Because it would be super competitive to compete with those students from overseas.
No, I wouldn't. Now, if I'm a
Excuse
UC, I
me,
would.
to be fair, we have enough time. That's the last question. If you do have a lot more questions, we have a later on one-on-one appointment and other time to particular answering your own questions because we have to take everybody's time more serious.
So,
yeah, that's the last question.
Last question, yes.
Thank you for the time, really appreciate it.
Sure.
One quick question. How do you have any suggestion for students considering doubling majors? They have multiple majors. I want to be a music student, but I also want to be an engineer.
Yeah, I would tell them to apply as a music student. And get in as the music student and then figure out how you're going to make the engineering piece. Yeah, but eventually they might have to pick that one door that they're pushing on and to get into the university. Or they could actually apply as an engineering major and submit what's called a music supplement, which is like, oh, and by the way, I'm also a great musician. I would probably have to see their numeric profile to see which door I'm going to try and open. So if they're like, okay, I'm applying to MI, what's a great, like, I'm applying to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science, I'd be like, maybe we do Carnegie Mellon, get in through the music door, and then see how we can work our way over to engineering rather than trying to push open that really hard door. Does that make sense? So it's just really about a case-by-case basis based upon the schools on the list. Most colleges are really looking at just one door you're trying to open. So I do want to thank you very much. I know it's very hot in here, and I do apologize for moving very, very quickly, but I tried to get through a lot. Thank you very much. And
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everyone, for your question. If you have further questions, please scan our code, and all our coaches, including Martin, will be ready there, ready to answer and super willing to answer your questions. We today, Harmony Plus, also offer this extra exclusive bonus. If you could take out your little application form, today we offer 20 free one-on-one consultation sessions. So if you could, the first 20 person who hand in and sign in the form and hand it to our table over there, you will have this free of charge, totally free of charge consultation opportunity in the future to sit down with one of our education consultants and to get their individualized, tailored suggestions on your child's growth and get the top secret to get into the Ivy League school. So thank you very much. We have this kind of pro bono Friday events every single Friday. So if you would like to join us every single Friday, you could always come to Harmony Plus, come to Mountain View, or join us by come to our digital platforms like WeChat, Zoom, and also Himalaya. So we'll always be there and super happy to answer all of your questions or pressing concerns on college application. So thank you very much for Christina for providing this location. Yes.